Hey guys, welcome to NoDQ.com. My name is David Joseph Diaz and I'm brand new to the website as a reporter and a writer. I can't thank Aaron Rift enough for the opportunity, and more than anything, when it comes to those opportunities, this is one of the biggest ones of my career. I was able to catch up with former WWE backstage interviewer Sean Mooney earlier this week, so I hope you enjoyed the interview. Do you can come back to the website, obviously, for the very best in wrestling news and rumors.
All right, man.
So anyway, Sean, we're going to start pretty much with what's happened in the last year and a half, and almost 2 years now. It's more than anything else, you've gotten yourself back into the into the business. More than anything else, obviously, with your products or your podcast, which is Primetime Mooney, which you started off with Jim Duggan, then you've gone solo. So tell us about that. How's it evolved, and what's it like to be back in professional wrestling?
Yeah, David, I'll tell you, it's been a little crazy thinking now. When you just said a year and a half, and I just somebody told me that the other day, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me, really?" And then I looked to see that we've done. I think we're nearing like the mid 80s now of the number of podcasts that we've done, and it's been quite a ride. And as you mentioned, getting back into wrestling. I guess I kind of came back in kicking and screaming because, I'd been out of it for a while. It wasn't that I was trying to get away, that I would watch it now and then, but I wasn't really that much on the current product, not much up on it. And I've really gotten back into it through the podcast and all these different people that I've gotten back in touch with, and also have met quite a few new ones. And it's really been a great experience because it was kind of a chance thing that it even came about. Court Bauer, who's with MLW and has a promotion of his own, had messaged me, DM'd, and told me that, would you be interested in doing something? He had a whole stable of podcasts with his MLW radio network, and I was thinking, geez. But he was pretty convincing, and I said, well, we'll give it a shot. I mean, see what happens. And, my career is, I've always been the interviewer, not the one who was being interviewed. And I was very comfortable in that role. And I just thought, he said, well, we can get somebody to be your co-host, and they can come on and ask you questions. I said, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm the host. And thought, well, it'd be great to get one of the superstars from that era that I really got along with well, and had briefly stayed in touch with over the years. I'd seen a couple of times, and I thought about Hacksaw, because Hacksaw was always such a great interview and had such a great sense of humor, and had kept himself very healthy. I mean, these guy's still working. I mean, every week he's still somewhere, and he came on with us for about 20 episodes. But it was just tough, at different ends of the country, and then with all the traveling he was doing. And he said, look, I just can't, I can't afford the time. We just kept, it was harder and harder for us to do podcasts together. And so I said, well, I really want to keep this going. And I figured, well, every week have a different one. And I knew at the time it was going to be kind of a tough assignment because, first of all, there's just so many variables when you're trying to track people down. A lot of them are from my era. We're talking 80s and 90s, the golden era, greatest time in wrestling. But they're a little older now, and a lot of them are not exactly tech savvy. They're not into Skype. They do have cell phones. So if you can get them on a cell phone, that's great. And so we just kind of started that way, and it just one after another, week after week after week. And now, like I said, I think we're at episode 84, so it's been really fun.
And more than anything else, it's great as well because sometimes, obviously, the fact that you're on the road with them, but at the same time, you don't really have the time to get to know them pretty much as people. And obviously, maybe there was things that you get to know once you're interviewing them as well. What's that feeling like?
Well, I'll tell you, it's been really awesome because, first of all, it wasn't like I didn't know them back then or know about their lives, but so much has changed. And we're talking, 30 years almost. And, and the biggest thing that has come out of the podcast, because first, I kind of went into it thinking, okay, we'll just talk about their time in wrestling and what it meant to them and all the different events. And, well, it just kept going. and many of them, I'll say, the high percentage is they're really inspirational stories, because it's not easy to make it in this business. And you can imagine what it was like back in the 80s when we didn't have the social media. We didn't have the WWE corporation that was this gigantic company that you could go to work for. You had the territories all over the place, and you basically traveled from territory to territory, and were separated from your families for even longer than when I worked with the WWF in those days. And just to get there, and then to get to the WWF, you really had to have persistence. And these are guys that would not take no for an answer. And they just kept, no matter how many times they got knocked down, because this is a really, really tough business, they kept getting up. And I started to see, after we got into several of these episodes, that these are inspiring stories. It doesn't matter about wrestling. This is about life. These guys are just really inspirational human beings, and you can learn something by listening to their stories. And many of them had such great messages for people. And so besides learning about the history of wrestling and about this glorious time that we had the privilege of being a part of, I've also learned about their lives, and I've been inspired by them, and I know that my listeners have too.
It's great as well, because at the same time, it's like you mentioned, the grueling schedule as well, because I remember, obviously, growing up, you'd have to record like in promos or anything else, obviously for different markets, obviously on different parts of the United States, even the world. And obviously the fact, those must have been grueling as well, because you're repeating a script except just changing the city or the town. So it must have been very demanding to get all those done as well.
Yeah, and I was very fortunate when I came in that they were making that transition, because prior to that, Gene and we're all still mourning his loss with his recent passing. But Gene was just one of a kind. And prior to my arrival there, he would do these promo interviews where he'd go to the arenas, and they would do these interviews all day long with the talent. And not only would Gene have to customize it, but the wrestler would too, because it was this one-on-one interview. And they came up with the idea to do the event center, which allowed the talent to just do interviews specific to their whatever the storyline was. They didn't have to say that I'll be at the Rosemont Horizon this Friday. That was my job. And so that lightened the load for a lot of them, and Gene was able to go and do all the other great things he did for the WWF, WWE. And but I was in Stanford most of the week, 3 or 4 days a week, customizing these to all the bridges. And if people remember the programming back then, we had Wrestling Challenge, Superstars of Wrestling, Primetime, all the shows we had, and I would be in every one of them, and I pretty much customized every show. And so I would just all day long do these ins and outs and bridges, and we would customize, I think at the height, somewhere between 90 markets a week. And each one of those little segments would appear 3 times in the show, because that's really what the purpose of those programs was to sell tickets, get people to come to the house shows, because that's where they made their money, and that's how the boys got paid. And it was grueling. I would lose my voice probably 2 times a year, where I just couldn't talk, and they had to shut things down and give me a couple of days to try and recover. But there were weeks there where those event centers, you could tell I was struggling, but at least I wasn't on the road as a lot of the boys were, where these guys were, 2 weeks on, a few days off, another week on, back home for a couple of days. And you talk about a grueling schedule, and they had to get on planes and be all over the United States then, and Canada and the other places that we went. So it was, it was a lot of work back then for everybody.
And you mentioned there, like, the most pivotal thing about this was that me and Gene Okerlund, like you mentioned, that obviously we're still mourning his loss. I don't think the world or the professional wrestling has been affected by such a loss in a long time. Obviously, because Mean Gene was the voice in every sense of the word.
Oh, absolutely. And I've said it many times. I said it after his passing, and I will say it till I'm not here anymore. But there was Gene Okerlund, and then there were the rest of us, and all of us announcers were in the mix after that. But Gene was right, and it was there. There was nobody else like him. He basically, set that model that everybody wanted to aspire to. Nobody could match him, and besides all that, just a great guy, and he helped me so much.
Yeah.
During my career with the WWF, there's no way I would have lasted if.
Thing about Gene is the fact that when obviously they showed the special on the WWE Network, and you could actually see him preparing like with the talent. I think it was the Macho Man, I believe. And just before like he had that promo with the Macho Man, he was like directing him. Oh, maybe we could do this, we could do that. It was almost like Mean Gene was like the director of that particular segment, because he was trying to boost the talent to make them seem a little bit more legit to whoever they had to face. Even though Macho Man was already a big deal back then, but still, it's still amazing to me how much someone like Macho Man, who had the biggest confidence in the world, could still learn from someone like Mean Gene.
Well, and it also showed you, because I saw that same special, David, and that struck me too. But that showed you also there, as you mentioned, that Gene could do that, but the respect that Randy had for Gene, because as you can imagine, there was huge egos that were around the WWF, WWE, and for somebody to try and direct a talent, they would look at you like, really? You kidding me? But Gene could do that. And even with Hulk, they would kind of do that. I'd see that all the time. And that really just shows the immense respect that the best in the business had for him.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's like Hulk Hogan said, even Ric Flair said, even Macho Man has said prior to his passing in 2011, like I think everybody would say the same thing, that it wasn't really the fact that he was there to mentor you or even direct you or anything else. It's just the fact that how much he gave to promo. It's something as silly as when he caught up and did that interview with Ric Flair at the Royal Rumble in '92. Is like that. Put that cigarette out. It still stands out as one of the funniest things, but it shows you pretty much what Gene was like as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, and another thing is that, when we used to have these production meetings, Vince would always say, before we broke, that, nothing can go wrong. That was his kind of his slogan. That, he was saying the message is, look, no matter what happens, just go with it. But there was no one who could pull that off better than Gene Okerlund, because truly nothing could go wrong with Gene, because no matter what happened, he covered it. And I know, I heard an interview the other day or during the podcast with Bruce and Conrad and Bruce. They were talking about Gene, and Bruce produced many of those shows, and he said that, when Gene was out there, you didn't have to worry, because no matter what happened, he would find a way to cover it, and it would be seamless. People at home would not know the difference. They would have thought it was planned all along.
Yeah.
And, you think about live television, and anybody that's in this business who's been behind that microphone, as I have too, and things can go wrong. And you really have to be able to think on your feet. And I used to think I was pretty good at that as well, but did not compare it to Gene. Because Gene always had, no matter what, he'd have a quip or something that just brought you back, and whatever happened was in the rearview mirror.
It's always great as well, because the fact, like you mentioned, like when you came into the business, and obviously it was something new to you as well, to have someone to be under the guidance of someone like Mean Gene, who'd only been around it for almost 15, 16 years by that point, which may seem like like a lot, but he was relatively new to the business, like you were when you came in.
Yeah, but he had, really cut his teeth in the other in Minnesota, and so when he got to the WWF, he was a seasoned pro, and many people were, asking about what our relationship was like, especially when I first got there. And he could have accepted me in many different ways. He could have, totally ignored me. He could have, given me a hard time because I was some young buck trying to come in and feel threatened by me. Or he did exactly what he did. He just welcomed me open-armed and helped me from the day I got there till I departed that place. He could not have been warmer to me, and could not have given me more, because I was I mean, I was absolutely new to the business. I could not have been greener. Gene, not you may say he hadn't been in that many years, but Gene had been around it, knew what the business was all about. Kayfabe was still pretty strong at that point,
Yep.
and he gave me a lot of great advice that helped me survive that first year and beyond. And as I said, he could not have been better to me, and I never forgot it. He was a tremendous mentor and friend.
I think more than anything, it's very important. Like you mentioned kayfabe right there as well. It's very important as well. I don't think nowadays in wrestling, at least, it's very hard to understand what kayfabe is all around. It's all about more than anything else. Obviously, you see the bad guys mingling with the good guys in real life. Obviously, social media
Yeah.
plays a big part into that as well. You do see them interactions. After all, they're just people. They don't live the gimmick or they don't live the character, but it's very hard to understand, and to even live like that 24/7 is a very surreal thing. I remember Bret Hart spoke about this, about when he and his brother Owen had that feud in '94, and he was just saying he was on a thing in an airport, and then one of the stewardesses caught Bret and Owen talking to each other, and she was like, "Oh, I knew you guys were friends." Is that shows you how serious he had to take it, really.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. And no one really understands it unless you were a part of it. But it was still very much part of the business when I got there, and so you can imagine somebody from the outside trying to fit in. And I got good advice from Gene and also Gorilla and Lord Alfred Hayes, who helped me out a lot. But really, it was pretty simple. They just said, no matter what, don't try and be one of them. And that was the best advice I ever received. And you just had to hang in there. And I think, I know it's changed. The business is completely different, but I kind of missed that in a way, because once you were accepted, it was like, becoming a made man in the mafia or something. And I know that's a very extreme term, but it's the only thing that I can really make people understand is that, once you're in that brotherhood, you are for life, and it's not easy to get in. It was that strong back then. The guys would speak Carney when you walked into the locker room, and it was you truly felt like an outsider. And then to finally be accepted. Now, I will tell you again that doesn't mean you're one of them. But if you're accepted, you're part of that family. But you're never going to be one of them. And if you understand that, you're going to get along with them real well. If you try and cross that line, it's going to be a different story. And I saw many people come into that company and think that they could do that, and bad things happened to them, and they didn't stay very long. But I had some really good mentors, people looking after me, and that was that was part of my career. That's why I stayed at the WWF as long as I did.
And what was that initial reaction like when you get to, aside from Gene, obviously you mentioned Gorilla Monsoon, Lord Alfred Hayes, both Hall of Famers as well, but what is it like to believe and even get to know them as people? Because at the end of the day, obviously they do their job. Not that the kayfabe existed within the announcers, but sometimes you believe that maybe it would exist within the announcers as well.
Well, yeah, they were very much a part of that too. And, you have to understand what it was like back then. And yes, of course, they had to. They were part of that. The way things were done back then as well. A lot of the times, announcers were kept out of the loop just for purposes that they wanted them to have a natural reaction when they were out there, calling these matches. But they were very much a part of that business, and if you were allowed into that inner circle, you wouldn't tell, no matter how good of friends you were, if that was something no one else was supposed to know, you didn't cross that line.
Yeah.
And and so it's very different today, but there was something about it to be let into that circle, to be a part of that family is something that you never forget.
And it's a very huge transition as well, because when you think about it, when you joined the WWF, like the announce team, at least with Gorilla Monsoon, Jesse the Body Ventura, etc., like all of them were former wrestlers too, so they had to transition to what the business was becoming as well.
Yeah, Yeah, but I think that to become announcers, it was a much easier transition for them, and it also helped the fact it was the same way that you would consider like an ex NFL player who becomes an announcer, and having that insight and that respect because they've been there uh, added a whole perspective that other people could not just come in and do. That's why usually those guys are the color guys, that do the announcing, and the ones who haven't are the ones who do the play-by-play. But all those guys you mentioned were great at it. A lot of people don't realize, Bobby Heenan began, before he came to the WWF, he wrestled a lot of matches.
He did, yeah.
He was very skilled in the ring at taking bumps. He wasn't just, taking pratfalls. I mean, Bobby knew how to work in the ring. And if you remember some of those matches you ever watch, Bobby would sail across the ring and do that move where he'd fly up and go, around the top turnbuckle there and roll over back and hit the apron and then fall on the floor. I mean, that somebody who wasn't trained could not pull that off.
Yeah.
And so, the guys that they had there were, very experienced and very skilled wrestlers.
It took a lot of guts. It takes a lot of guts, especially. I mean, it's like you mentioned with Bobby as well. But I don't think people associate him as a wrestler, or even the fact that he had wrestled. He did wrestle a lot in the AWA. He did wrestle a lot even prior to going to the AWA in Chicago, in his hometown as well. So it's great when he went to the WWF, because he became a manager as well. That transition pretty much helps him out in every sense of the word, because the managers are there to take bumps as well. Maybe like if one of the clients is in front of them or distracted, or they have to learn how to take those bumps as well. But Bobby was a natural in every sense of the word.
Yeah, and that's what made him so great. Not only was he tremendous in front of the camera and on a microphone, but he had that added element that he could physically get involved in a match, which even put him even more over as a heel, and and did it expertly. He was just so great at it, and what people would look at as him taking some pratfall, but those are real bumps, and he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, and it's like everything else. I mean, like the gift of gab, I think, is an excellent thing, especially back in, like, now with commentary and everything else. It's like you have to transition in the sense, because you can't really be biased. Even like Gorilla Monsoon is a prime example of this, where even though some of the people he was announcing is probably wrestlers that he's wrestled, and even Jesse the same thing. But obviously Jesse would give it away in every sense of it, but that's him being the character. So it actually worked to their advantage, and pretty much the chemistry of every announcer team back then in the WWF. Even old Alfred Hayes, who was pretty much known as a bad guy prior to becoming an announcer, is what made it work. He's just this very fine, elegant gentleman, and he pulled it off as well. So it shows in every sense of the word. But that's Alfred being Alfred, I think.
Well, and also people don't realize that Alfred was this dreadful heel before he came to the WWF. And if anybody has the opportunity to see some of the tape from his matches as he plays the arrogant Englishman, you really should check it out. And also the promos he used to cut. He was fantastic at that. I really think he was a better heel than he was a babyface as an announcer, and the other things that we had him do. Although I certainly loved the time that I got to spend with him, what we got to do in front of the camera. But the classic stuff, boys, when he was a heel, and some of those old matches and the stuff he used to do in front of the camera. If you ever can track any of that down, folks, you should check it out.
Oh, highly recommended as well. I've seen those clips, and it's ruthless in every sense of the word.
Oh God, just great stuff.
Yeah. And outside of WWF, obviously, like, even when you're not on TV, obviously back then VHS becoming one of the hottest things in sliced spread at the time. Obviously, you were one of the faces of Coliseum Video. So tell us those experiences like as well. What were those experiences like?
Well, when they started with Coliseum Video, I don't think they really knew what was going to happen with it. Vince, being somebody who was always had a vision about business and what might lie ahead, saw an opportunity, and they said, well, let's see what happens. We'll put some of these matches on tape. We'll make some of them exclusive that nobody's seen before. make it sound like you're getting something nobody else is getting, these dark matches that weren't televised, and put them on tape. And I think that they probably thought they would do pretty well, because at that time, you had the blockbusters, and even before that, you had, these private video stores that people had owned in these small towns and cities all over America and all over the place. But I think that they were just blown away by how well they did. And it got to the point where, they were selling those tapes to these stores for, 80 plus over $100, because these stores could turn around and then rent them for $2, whatever, for a view, or per day, or whatever it was. And they could pay off that whatever that expense was in a very short period of time. And in the meantime, Titan Sports at the time made a fortune from it. And when we first started doing them, I don't think I said, Alfred and I both lived in Stanford, and they didn't know what they wanted to do for wraparounds, and they said, well, they're here, let them do the play-by-play, and let them do the wraparounds for a lot of these. And that's what we did. And then and we were pretty much at free reign. We just did whatever we thought would work. We had a producer, Kevin Graneth at the time, who would come up with some scenarios, and we would just fill the holes. And then when it started getting, they started having all kinds of great fortune with these tapes, then it got serious, and we had bigger productions, and it was more scripted, and it just got crazy. But I really get a kick out of people who come to some of the shows that I've been to, and they'll have these VHS tapes they want me to sign. So it's amazing after all these years that people still really enjoyed those Coliseum videos.
I mean, I can speak for maybe the European fan base of the show, but more than anything else, it's great all around, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, the dark matches and even the pay-per-views. I mean, before the advent of Sky Television, there wasn't really much WWF here in Europe. But once the VHS started being distributed all over around television, it was like, oh, I've never seen this match, or I've never seen this. And even for myself, there's some shows which I had never seen. I mean, I remember watching WrestleMania's Greatest Matches for the first time, and there were some matches in there that I had never seen, and I had never seen even the WrestleManias in full till it was about, I want to say, 13, 14. And it shows you pretty much the rarity of it all as well. It's like you said, like, you're getting a treat, and you're like, oh, I've got this match, maybe nobody else has it, sort of thing.
Yeah, what was great about it, too, at the time, and it was ahead of its time, really, and Vince always was with their marketing. They had great marketing people. And not only they did great jobs with the jackets. They made them really appealing that you'd want to buy them or rent them. But the idea with them is you were going to get something extra than what people would see on television every week. They were going to have a special match just for you to watch on this tape. And a lot of people bought them, even back then, because they could run the thing over and over again. They could have people over and have parties and play it whatever they wanted to, or play stuff back. And it was pretty brilliant at the time when you think about how they marketed those. And they would have, I think that in some of them they had, something, some kind of merchandise with it, or a 2-box set, or and they really made it special to want to have one of those tapes.
I mean, I can relate to, like you mentioned, to in the fact of wanting to have those tapes. I got my Bret the Hitman Hart shades with one of those videos, so that's one of my fondest childhood memories. So it stands out.
Great. I mean, it was brilliant.
It really does stand out, and like you mentioned, to this day, this still holds up. I see a lot of people still wanting to buy them, mostly because of the rarity of them all. Some of them go for quite a lot of money. Obviously, some of them are available on the WWE Network now as well, so it's a lot easier to go back in time to see what you missed, and even maybe if you're actually interested and you maybe still own a VCR, you'll end up buying an actual copy of it as well. So it's great all around how far it's come, like you mentioned.
We had a lot of fun shooting those. I love hearing from people now because, like you said, a lot of them are on the WWE Network, and we had a lot of fun shooting the different bridges between those matches where there was always some different scenario, whether it was on the golf course with Bobby and Gene, or we had the Star Trek spoof. We did one on, Rod Serling, and the Twilight Zone, and we had a lot of fun doing those, and I think people really enjoyed them. And I love hearing from people now saying, "Oh yeah, I love when you did that one tape and you guys were all dressed up." And Alfred and I went to England and did a whole thing there, and yeah, it was we had a blast.
Well, I bet, and they look like fun too, and that's the most important thing, really.
Yeah.
When you see the fun that you guys have, and you mentioned like even before, obviously, like you're end up with scripts, it was all ad libs, and that's I think what adds more to the cake, if that's the right term to use, even.
Oh yeah, and we had. I wish they would have had one. We would have saved all the outtakes because we really had some great ones. I wish we would have saved them.
I mean, I think it's amazing. Like we're going back to what we mentioned about Gene. Is when I was watching this special, I'm amazed as to how many outtakes exist in the W archive, more so than anything else, because of everything else. It's like camera's still on, but it shows you what they're really like as people. You have to look beyond that as well.
Yeah, and yeah, they do have a lot of them. I'd love to see that collection because they didn't. That was one thing about the WWF WWE. They don't throw away anything, and a lot of that stuff still exists. And keep watching on the network. I'm sure they're going to probably have some of that stuff. I'd love to see some from the event center because I had quite a few myself.
Oh, I'll look forward to that. If that's going to be the case, I'll definitely check it out. So, Sean, it's very easy to say, but not very easy to imagine. But when you see the transition, obviously, because you mentioned the fact that the World Wrestling Federation was just a regional promotion, then it took over the world. You guys came over through all over in Europe, all over the world, really. But what was it like to transition and to come out? Like sometimes you'd come, sometimes you wouldn't. But one of the biggest things, maybe in fondest memory of any wrestling fan, is SummerSlam '92 from London, England, and obviously because that was a pay-per-view and everything else. What was it like for you to be amongst that atmosphere and to witness that spectacle as well?
Well, I'll tell you, when people ask me about my favorite events, that is right there. I mean, that's top three. I won't even say top five. That SummerSlam was just incredible, and to go to that stadium and just see that sea of people, and it's a different crowd over there. They sing. I'm a big rugby fan. I actually went over to Wales and played some rugby over there and played a couple of games in England. And we went to Wembley Stadium for a match there. And I just remember the crowds and how they chant throughout the game. And they were doing that at SummerSlam, which I just got such a kick out of. And of course, the match that just is one of my all-time favorites is that match between Davey Boy and Brett. And just not only because it was an incredible match, but just all the drama that was surrounding it. That Davey Boy was in no shape, in his own words, to be in that ring, and yet it was one of his greatest matches ever. And just the combination of those two. So that event certainly stands out to me. And just going over there, and I'll tell you, David, it was amazing for me because I had grown used to at that point at being recognized when I went to events or different cities if it was near the event and people were WWF fans. But I was not prepared at all for when the first time I went over to England. And I remember in the at the hotel, that when we got there were thousands of people, it seemed like, in the streets. And, I'd seen this before, but they knew who I was. And I'm like, what the hell? I mean, they were, the lad, it's the lad. And people had slipped notes under my door and in my hotel room, and I was just totally blown away. And then I realized when I was talking to Alfred that he said, Sean, we're the first people who have really localized, we've customized, England, and no one else from WWF had really done that. I would say coming to Prince Albert Hall or whatever it was, and for them to say, oh, he's talking about, that place right near me. I'm going to go to that event. So it brought a almost personal connection to me. And then I understood. I'm like, oh, okay, now I got it. And that was just so cool. I mean, I still remember that to this day. And I'll tell you, even after all these years, I still get cards from people from the UK, and of course now the podcast is a big portion of my audience is from the UK because we can, they break it all down. You can see exactly where people are listening, and a large outside of the United States, the UK is the biggest collection of listeners that I have for the podcast. So I've always had a real strong connection to the folks in the UK. Still haven't made it to the homeland yet, to Ireland, but imagine I've been over there so many times and I still haven't gotten there. But I have a very, very strong connection with the people in the UK.
And like you mentioned, the most important thing is that Davey Boy wasn't really in the shape to wrestle, and I learned that through meeting Diane. I actually got to meet her, and I had interviewed her in 2013, but then I actually got to meet her in 2015, and actually we spoke about that, and it was like everything else. She was like, oh, because Davey wasn't in the shape to wrestle, and you hear these stories, and like obviously it's inside knowledge then, but when you listen to it and then you watch that match, you're like, you're kidding me, right? But it shows you, and the goosebumps, even when that happened, even for Davey Boy himself, and even for Brett, and even for Diana, and all the fans involved, and even I dare say the entire World Wrestling Federation, it just stands out as one of the biggest moments in the history of the WWF or the WWE even.
Yeah, and it's for David. I swear to God, this is just freaky because I just got a message from Diana, Diana Hart, because I want to get her on the podcast to talk about that, all about that, and I got to know her when back in the day when everything was happening, and the Hart family was there. Stu used to come to all the matches with the big events. And just a great family. And I've been trying to get in touch with her. It's so funny that here we did mention it, and I just came up on my phone. That's so we're going to get her on the podcast soon. But yeah, that was just incredible. I would love to have heard the story from Davey Boy these years later. Unfortunately, we lost him, but I did. I had his son Harry on. Davey Boy Smith, as he goes by in the ring, but just a fascinating episode with him. Folks should check it out if you haven't.
Totally agree.
The episode with Harry Smith. Just a great. It was a really awesome perspective because you have to take the point that he was very young for when his father was alive. He was 17 when he passed. So his whole viewpoint was from a completely different perspective as a child, and how. When his dad would come home, and it wasn't often in those days because those guys were just, they're riding the wave. And he would come home, maybe every few weeks for just a couple of days, and he's exhausted and from being on the road and just wants to rest. And here's a young boy who's, of course, enamored by his father. His friends all know who Davey Boy Smith is, and he just wants to be near him. He just wants to, have his dad.
Yeah.
And he talks about how he would just talk wrestling because he didn't know, what else in common to talk to him about. Davey Boy didn't want to talk about wrestling. That's all his whole life had been. But he understood, and that was their connection. And that's just a great podcast. I loved that one so much because it was from a different view that I don't think people often hear.
Yeah.
From the son of Davey Boy, but. Yeah, that's an interesting chapter in the history of the WWF, and the fact that him and Brett pulled off a match that people still say is one of the greatest ever.
Yeah.
And to consider the shape he was in and then he was able to do that is just incredible.
Yeah, it is. And I dare say, like you mentioned, I got, when I met Diana, I was fortunate enough to meet her daughter Georgia, and then I got to meet Harry as well. And it was one of those things where I remember, I can use a British Bulldog story, but my brother calls me Davey Boy because of my love for the British Bulldog, and it shows, and obviously the fact that obviously Gibraltar's British territory too, so like everything else, it was like, okay, once you get to meet Diana, which is great, and she's a great all-around person, one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met, Then you get to meet Harry. Then you get to meet Georgia. Then you get to meet Brett, and all in the same weekend as well. So it was like, how surreal is this? You're in London, England, of all places as well. So obviously the topic of SummerSlam is going to come up. And just speaking to Diane about it, and even when I interviewed her in 2013, she spoke about it. And getting to know all these stories from a different view, like you mentioned, that happened with you with Harry, I can so relate with that. And it was so personal as well, because it's coming from the heart. And you'd wish that Davey was here to listen to it. And more than anything else with Davey, mostly because of that moment, and obviously because of now the UK wave, and obviously how much they're doing now in the United Kingdom, the WWE. I think now it's the right time to induct one of the biggest pioneers to come from the UK into the WWE Hall of Fame, and I really hope that does happen eventually.
Well, I'll tell you, it's amazing to me it hasn't, and you're right. I think that he definitely deserves to be there, and I certainly hope that happens, because I remember back then when I was there, just how huge the British Bulldogs were. I'm talking about Dynamite Kid along with that duo there, and then also what Davey Boy was able to do beyond that in singles action. So, and I believe it will. I don't think that that's something that's not going to happen.
Speaking about the Hall of Fame, Sean, do you feel eventually that maybe you would end up getting the call?
People ask me that all the time. I don't really ever think of. You ask me, I would say I don't think so. I was there 5 years. I think I was there during a very impactful time. I think I did leave a mark in a sense of what I did. But if it's Hall of Fame worthy? I don't know. There's so many other people that contributed to the success of that company. I would be absolutely honored. There's no question about that. But do I expect it? No, I'm not. I'm not expecting that call anytime soon.
Well, we'll leave it at that. And obviously, you've gone back to the WWE since. Obviously, you left in '93. Then 2005, you're part of Homecoming. Then you've done other things. But obviously, you did hosted the WWE Unreleased DVD from 2017. Obviously, you did stuff with Edge and Christian. So, what is it like to get that call to go back to Stamford and record all these segments?
Well, it's awesome that I have that relationship, because I think that would have left a hole in me if I hadn't had that opportunity to go back and be a part of something. I wouldn't want to go back to that daily grind. It's kind of a young person's business now in much every sense of the word. But I would love to go back and do vintage stuff, and maybe. That kind of thing. Anytime that they have me come back to do that kind of stuff, I love it, and it's great to be a part of the content of what they're doing and contributing to the network. And also, it's been a blast doing the Edge and Christian show. I've gotten to know those two guys, and for some reason I've become part of that troupe, and I'm very happy to be a part of it, because they know I roll with everything. And they learned that when they brought both Gene and I in for that episode where we were thinking we were going to become the Edge and Christian show house announcers, and we realized that they brought us in to audition for bartender.
Yeah.
And we just rolled with it, and they even surprised me. There was some blue content in there that I never expected, and some of the lines Gene had for me. I remember taking a picture of the teleprompter because I said, Gene, I've got to remember this, because no one's going to believe this is what you said to me on a WWE product.
Yeah.
But we had so much fun that day. That's one. I cherish that day, and if you look at the pictures, you can tell how much fun we had together and hanging out. And it was like old times. That show was scripted, but a lot of that stuff we threw aside, and we just rolled with it.
I think the most important thing is that when you can capture that pretty much that in those moments that you did on the show is Edge and Christian are fans, and they've actually grown up with you too. So for them, it's just as an honor to go back and actually relate and even work with you, because they never got the chance. And even for you to go back as a godsend to work with Gene again as well.
Yeah, it was that was a really special experience, and I know they loved working with Gene too. I don't know if they expected that we would be able to hang with him as far as just whatever you got, let's go.
Yep.
And Gene and I learned that real early on. Gene was already a master at it. I learned under his tutelage, and and I'll tell you, in everything I've done since, that training has been a godsend for me. It has saved me so many times from and being fearless. That no matter what you're doing in front of a camera, you can make it work.
Oh, for sure.
And when you're in front of millions of people on live television, it doesn't get any more, get it done now or else than that.
Absolutely. And I mentioned at the beginning of the question, obviously, about the fact that you hosted the unreleased DVD, which is pretty similar to the Colosseum video stuff that we were talking about before. But is there plans maybe for Volume 2? Have you been in contact with WWE about it?
Well, yeah, I get texts once in a while about we're thinking about doing another one, but nothing nothing solid now. But I'd heard they were going to do another one, but who knows? When and it may not involve me. But I know that a lot of people enjoyed that tape, and I would love to host another one. I had a great time doing that. So who knows? I have a good relationship with everybody there. They know that I love coming back, and anytime they got something for me, I'm on a plane.
Time will tell. And obviously, you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to. But have you seen Vince since? Have you been at WWE Stanford headquarters in Stanford?
No, I haven't seen. I saw Vince, I think, one time in Phoenix years ago, probably almost 8-9 years ago, maybe. And even the time the trips I've been back there, now everybody really knows the whole setup of that place. There's the tower, where they have the headquarters, and that's where Vince's office is, and then the television facility is still there at Hamilton, but Hamilton's a mile away, and Vince only usually comes over there if he's going to record something. And all the times I've been there, either we've been out on location or he hasn't been by. I'd love to run into him. I don't think it would be strange or anything. I've always spoke highly of him. He gave me so much opportunity in my career and always took care of me. So anytime, I've never had any sharp words for Vince because he was always good to me.
Future guest, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe there's a possibility there.
Yeah, that would be a great get, wouldn't it? I'm working on that one, but
I think you'll have to divide it.
Too much of many of those.
Yeah, I think you'll have to divide it like 5 parts. I think Vince has got so much to say and so much to tell.
Yep, maybe one day.
Who knows? You never know. So, Sean, we're going to finish up with the final question, and it's a very simple one as well. What's the future for Primetime Mooney looking like? Obviously, you mentioned the fact that you're approaching almost 100 episodes. I think you're 16 away now. So, tell us about that. What's the future plans like?
Yeah, God, I didn't even think about that, David. Yeah, we are approaching 100. Wow. Well, Primetime with Sean Mooney is we've started a Patreon membership now, which kind of blown me away by how many people have signed up. And it's not even 2 weeks old. And we're really happy with that. It gives people an opportunity to get a little something extra. I do little videos on there. We have watch-alongs. We have Q&As where we can come on and people can actually come on screen with me through this platform that we use and ask me questions or just interact, whatever. That's been a lot of fun. And we've made up a list of guests that we want to have on, and it's at 100 right now, and we've already checked a few off there. So I was thinking, how many more people can we get? But the show has evolved. We've expanded it to where we've talked to people that were coming up to the business prior to the 80s and when the WWF took off and changed the world. And we've had guests on that are part of this new surge of young independent wrestlers that are changing the world of professional wrestling again, and how it all affects the WWE. And many of these guys were coming up. They were kids when I was working, and so they remember those days. So that's why a lot of them became professional wrestlers. So it's all part of this this big giant bowl that we can draw from.
Absolutely.
And we make every show to me has been compelling. I mean, I've loved doing them. So far, I think people like what they're hearing, and we'll keep doing them as long as people like what they're hearing, because I'm enjoying it.
And the most important thing is, if you do become a patron, you get the show available a day early, I believe, and then obviously it's uploaded every Wednesday as well.
That's right. You get those early, and then also we just reached another milestone with our membership. So every time we hit one of those, I put out a bonus episode. So you're ready to put that out. But you can still catch the podcast absolutely free. You got to listen to a couple of my advertisers on there, but I got to take care of my team. And so, you can get Primetime with Sean Mooney on, iTunes and all the other platforms that you get your podcasts from. I hope everybody will check it out, because we've got a vast library now. If there's a superstar from that part of your life during the 80s and 90s, we'd probably talk to them. There's still a few I'm trying to track down, but we've got a lot of them on there. And as I mentioned earlier, they're all great stories.
And it's very interesting as well, even for the one who's relatively new to the business, even when you want to see what the fuss is about from back then. I do highly recommend them myself, so do check them out, guys.
It's a conversation. I don't call them interviews. It's a conversation.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I always say, like, when I interview musicians for a living, and I do resonate with that, because at the end of the day, for me, it's like getting to know things I didn't know, but at the same time, forget that the microphone is on. It's all conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then people feel like they're part of it. I mean, they really do. It's like they're right in the room with you.
Yep, I absolutely agree. So, Sean, we're going to wrap up, and more than anything else, I really do want to thank you for your time, and obviously for allowing me to do this for one of my debuts here at NoDQ.com as well.
Well, I'm honored that you had me on as one of your debut interviews. So we'll do it again, David, and best of luck.
Thank you very much.
I know it's a great site. I know a lot of people who check on that site all the time, and I will as well now, and catch more and more of your interviews and articles.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. It means a lot to me. So, guys, we thank Sean for his time, and we'll be back hopefully with another interview very, very soon. But for now, there will be a lot of articles I'll be posting on the website. Part 1 is already available, and I take a look at probably the top 10 what-if moments in the history of professional wrestling. Do check it out and give us feedback. You can follow me on Twitter as well, which is at DJDS_NoDQ, and DS is DIAZ. Thank you, Sean, and you can follow him as well at Primetime Mooney, and obviously do check out his podcast, which is highly recommended for any new fans of professional wrestling as well as old school fans alike. So thank you guys, take care, and we'll see you very soon.